and I was going through some dark things, the one thing that I could rely on out of anything in this world was prayer. What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me. You have tuned into the DeTox Podcast. This is episode number 18, and the title of this episode is The Power of Prayer. Now, before we jump into things, I want to read one of my favorite scriptures, and it's Philippians 4:6. Out of the Amplified Bible. And it says, "Do not be anxious or worried about anything, but in everything, every circumstance and situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, continue to make your specific request known to God." And that sums up everything that we're going to talk about here. The way we live through life with this new age mentality, with this, I don't trust God, I don't have enough faith in God, all of these things that I see on social media, especially like TikTok, there's this new age movement where you're your own God and you become yourself and you do all of these other things. I wanted to remind people the actual power of prayer. And I wanted to share some information with you that happened in my life that I don't randomly just share with anybody. If you've known me since a child, then you might know this story. But for anybody else out here that doesn't know me, let me tell you about my story regarding the power of prayer. So I had a mother that was very, very strong, and she was very outspoken with her prayer life. She was outspoken with how much she loved God. And sometimes when I was younger, it would just get to the point, I'm like, Mama, like, you're always talking about God. You're always saying, if you lose your car keys, pray. If you lose your mind, pray. If you lose it, every solution was prayer. And as a young man, as a boy, I didn't quite understand that like I understand it now. But she was like, whatever she was doing, anything that bothered you, anything that you struggle with, you were having a hard time with your homework, whatever that was, she was like, pray. You need to pray. You need to pray. And it makes so much sense. And I'm so grateful that I had a praying mother like that and had parents that lived their life of examples of prayer. So let me tell you a story. So when I was younger, my knees were bow-legged. My knees kind of went in and I kind of walked funny. And the people that knew me, cousins and friends of the family as such, they knew this. So they can attest to this. So I'm not just making this up. And my mother started praying for my knees. She started praying for my legs, and she started praying earnestly for years on and pressing in and believing and having faith that I was going to be healed, and that I wasn't going to need special shoes, and that I was going to be healed from my legs not growing the way they were supposed to. And lo and behold, God answered a prayer. And I'm grateful for that, because if he didn't, then I would have still been bow-legged, and who knows how that could have affected my life. Doctors would tell you your legs just don't change like that once they already stop. You don't grow out of being bow-legged. This was an act of my mother's faith and my mother's prayer that allowed me to be healed from being bow-legged. And people might not believe that. People might not understand, maybe this, maybe that. But in my heart of hearts, that is one of my earliest memories of a miracle that happened. And that miracle happened to me because of my mom's earnest prayer. The prayer and the crying and the tears and the faith to believe that this was going to happen for me. And it did. Now, I'm a state champion in track. I can still dunk. I can still jump out of the gym. I can do a lot of things that I wasn't supposed to do if I didn't have a praying mother. And that is part of the reason why I firmly believe in the power of prayer. My mother used to tell me stories about prayer. She used to tell me stories about her mother and her father not having enough food. And when they turned around and went to their front door, there was food there. There was a bag of food there when her father was on a trip and all they could make was a sandwich. But every time he bit that sandwich, it grew. That is the power of prayer. That's not an illusion. That's not fake. This is God working. This is God showing up because of our faith. And God talks about it. He says, if you have faith of a mustard seed is the very tip of a pencil. That's the size of a mustard seed. If you have that much faith and belief in God that we can move mountains. And I believe that in this day and age, because we're so limited by our 3D mind, we're so limited at what we can see and what we can touch. That is what we believe. And that is not reality. The power of prayer works. Prayer is real. I don't care who thinks it's fake. I don't care if you've never prayed and you say, oh, who am I praying to? This mysterious being. This you're praying to your creator. You're praying to who created you and molded you and formed you. And no matter what people try to say, there will be a day where you will be called and held accountable of your actions and held accountable of what you're doing and saying to people. And did you try to live a life? Did your heart love me because he gave up his son for us? And I want to be called in that number. And I'm not perfect by any means, but I do want to be called when that time is here. And God says, well done, my good and faithful servant. And I think part of that is because I believe in prayer. I believe in the power of prayer. I went to college. And the school system in elementary and high school was never set up for me. They said he has ADHD, impulsive. He does things. He has a learning behavior. He needs these teachers' aid to come and sit with him in class. So I was never empowered in school to be who I am today. When I graduated high school, I felt stupid. When I graduated high school, I didn't feel like I was smart enough to continue through college. And it really, my first year of college, I was on a track scholarship, and it was really tough for me because I didn't feel like I was smart enough to study. I didn't feel like I could comprehend this information because the school and the system of school, the teachers, I didn't have enough faith in myself, enough belief in myself. So when I decided to go back to school, I spoke to God and I said, God, you know, I am not a fan of school, but I know I have to go and get a degree in order to become the provider, become the father that I want to be. And God told me this. He said, you finish school and I promise I will take care of you. After I started school, I was in my first semester. And that's when I found out I was having a son. So it's not like school's not hard enough or work's not hard enough. Now I'm having this child, which scared me even more from fatherhood, from how am I going to navigate school and all of these things. So I say all of that to say that going through school took me 6 years, 6 long years of school, online school, going to class, community college, then transferring to ASU. All of these things, it took so much time and wear and tear while I'm trying to take care of my son. I'm trying to provide for my son. I'm living in cricket infested apartments. There's roaches in some of these apartments. My son didn't have his own room until he was 5 years old. I'm telling you the struggle. I'm telling you that through this time, I held on to God saying, you finish school and I will take care of you. And it was the prayer. Every time that I got weak, I said, God, you told me, he said, finish school and I will take care of you. And I'm pushing forward. And you got to remember, I didn't have the mentality that I was smart. But what I found out is I learned how to study. I learned how to buckle down and do my work. I learned how to, hey, when my son goes to bed at 8 o'clock, I'm studying till midnight. I did that for years. I was working full time and going to school anywhere between 9 to 12 credits a semester. But I held on to that. And when I became at my weakest point, I said, God, please help me. I remember being so crushed with math. I had took an accelerated math class and I was so crushed. And I remember just crying out of frustration because I didn't understand it and I didn't have much help. And there was no tutors at that time. And I remember balling up the piece of paper and throwing it. And I'm like, I give up. I hate this. And I'm like, God, you got to help me. And he calmed me down and he allowed me to center myself. And there was a peace that came over me where I started doing this homework. Things that I didn't understand became clear. It was like he unlocked a part of my brain that understood math on a different level. And that was something that had never happened. The power of prayer. I'm telling you, the power of prayer works. I don't care what people say. I don't care what people think. This is my reality. This is the life that I'm living. As a 36-year-old man, this is the reality. I've been through things that hurt. I've been through things that I've struggled through, but prayer has gotten me through. I've had some horrible bosses in my past where I had a boss tell me, and I've shared this before, that there is no God because he knew I was a believer. But the power of prayer, I started praying for that man. Instead of hating him, I started praying for him. The power of prayer. Little did I know that I was going to be praying for people that I didn't even necessarily like. The power of prayer is important and it works. Fast forward to year 6. I get a call and they say, we need you to go apply for this position. In my mind, I knew this was the stepping stone because I had stayed true to school. I had buckled down for 6 years praying for an elevation in my life, that God was going to reward me. And inside of 8 months of accepting that job, he rewarded me. And let me tell you this, it was 3 months before I graduated with my degree with honors. God made me wait 5 years and 9 months, almost 6 years before he answered my prayer for a role at a company where I was able to provide, where my son was able to get his own room, where I was finally able to go on vacation for the first time and it be fully paid for with no stress and no worrying about paying this off later. How powerful is that? The power of prayer. That's just one of the testimonies I have with the power of prayer. One, a personal testimony of God healing and changing the structure of my legs so that I could walk, so that I could run, so that I could jump, so that I could be a state champion. I have high school records in track. There are things that God had helped me through. And because of the generational prayer that my mom prayed over us, that my parents prayed over us, I now have faith. And now with my own son, I now have faith. And he will remind me sometimes, he's like, Dad, did you pray about that? And I'm like, oh man, how could I ever forget to pray when I know all of the prayers that I have prayed for years that he has answered? So I encourage you to remain steadfast. Even if the answer has not come, there are prayers that I've been praying for years that have not been answered, but I will not give up until I have my last breath. I will continue to pray because I know that the faith is there, that he is going to touch me and that he's shown me things that I have to continue to have faith regardless of what my 3D vision looks like. Because I can't touch it, because I can't feel it, does not mean it's not real and that it's not promised to you. That it's not promised to me that one day this is going to happen in God's timing. The power of prayer is so powerful, it's so touching, it's something that a lot of people can't seem to comprehend. And even at your lowest moment, even at my lowest moment, when I was just plagued with anxiety and depression, and I was going through some dark things, the one thing that I could rely on out of anything in this world was prayer. on my knees praying, in the shower praying, begging, asking God to touch me. And little did I know was he already had his covering over me, that he already touched me, he already loved me, but my faith had slipped. I didn't understand that the prayer was already answered. And I wasn't living in that life. I wasn't living in that faith. And God had to remind me, you got to live right there where you are prayerful with prayer and petition. You submit your request to me, and you have to believe that I have answered them even when you don't see it. The power of prayer is dangerous if you use it correctly. Prayer works. It works for me. It works for you. It worked for Jesus. Jesus would tear off and go pray. And if Jesus had to pray so many times, how much more do we need to pray? Someone that never sinned needed to pray so much. How much does our sinful nature and how we are require us to get alone by ourselves and to go and pray? The power of prayer works. I challenge you to use it. I challenge you to not always be focused on what you can see, but focus on what God promised you. Focus on what you're praying for. And if it's in line with God, this is a promise. This is a guarantee. If it's in line with God and you continue to pray and you're living the life that God wants you to live, he will answer your prayers. Thank you so much for joining me. Episode number 18. But until next time, peace.